The modal auxiliary shall is one of these tricky auxiliaries in the fact that it's becoming increasingly obsolete. So many people don't actually use shall anymore, and its usage seems to shrink every year. Shall is usually contrasted with will, and in fact will is these days taking over most of the functions of shall. So instead of explaining really what will can all cover, I thought it might be easier just to talk about shall and see what's still left for shall to do. Shall covers really three different areas, three things we can do with it. And the first one is commands. If you say, for instance, you shall obey, so you shall obey, okay, you can see here that commands in the second person sometimes have shall in them. Now the reality is that often will is taking the spot of shall here as well. So often people will say you will obey or you must obey. But if you do want to use shall, then this would be one place where you can use it. You can also use it with questions or suggestions. So questions or suggestions. And if you say, for instance, shall we dance? Shall we dance? Then you can see that sort of in between a question and a suggestion. So that's still quite common. In fact, that's probably the most common use of shall these days, and that's one that will continue for some time to come. The one that's the trickiest is the future tense, and in the past shall was often used to form the future tense, but just for the first person. So for the first person, and that means especially I and we. And if you say, for instance, and I'll quote Churchill here, Sir Winston Churchill once said, "We shall fight on the beaches," you know, this long speech, we shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, and so on and so forth, one of his famous speeches. You can see that being British, he's definitely grammatically correct. He uses shall, and we use shall to form the future instead of will if we're using the first person, so that would be I or we. This is still more common in British English, but in American or North American English, most people just use will, and it's quite possible that in the future will completely overtake shall to form the future. So to sum up then, shall is falling by the wayside, but you can still use it in commands in the second person, questions and suggestions, or the future in the first person if you want to be hyper correct. That's it for shall.